I think that I have a huge passion for the game of basketball. I have a huge passion for women's leadership. And I think, I'm really excited to be entering into the WNBA Commissioner role as a real platform for all of these players, the owners, the whole basketball ecosystem, quite frankly, to drive it, to the next level. Clearly, the biggest opportunities for the league are to enhance the fan experience, the player experience, for there to be a recognition of how important a time in women's leadership and the W's role in that. So this is just such a great time for everyone to rally around these WNBA players, attend the games, sponsor the WNBA, use it as part of your women's leadership platform. I think there's so much potential upside. I'm very excited.
In San Francisco tomorrow, you're on the Las Vegas Strip. What can the Las Vegas expect from Sophie?
Oh, you know what? I'm just gonna be me. I don't go in there trying to predetermine anything. I'm dialed in. I need to focus on hitting my shots, making sure I'm executing the schemes right. I'm not focused on the extracurricular activities. And you know what? During that, it was just part of the game. I think the refs had a lot to do with that. It was a build-up for a couple of years now of them just not protecting, the star player of the WNBA. And so at the end of the day, I'm going to protect my teammates. That's what I do. And I'm a team player, so.
The moment Sophie Cunningham filed a federal lawsuit against WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, everything changed. What began as an on-court moment of tension quickly escalated into something far more serious, a legal and cultural conflict that would capture headlines and spark debate across the league. The $2 million lawsuit wasn't just about a suspension, it was about principle. And suddenly, the spotlight turned from the hardwood to the boardroom. For weeks, Engelbert had remained behind the scenes, speaking only through official league channels. She avoided interviews, press conferences, and personal statements. But as fan support for Cunningham grew louder and more visible, Engelbert's silence began to seem less strategic and more evasive. Sophie wasn't just defending her teammate anymore. She had become a symbol of accountability, a challenge to the league's leadership. Then everything shifted. A confidential memo from Engelbert was leaked to the press. In it, the commissioner made clear that the WNBA would not allow outside pressure to influence disciplinary decisions. She emphasized that fairness meant consistency and that bending the rules for a popular player would be a mistake. Her tone was measured but firm. However, to fans and critics alike, it came off as dismissive. The memo didn't ease tensions, it magnified them. And when Engelbert finally broke her public silence at a scheduled media event, what many hoped would be an open conversation turned into a declaration of authority. Engelbert made it clear she stood by the decision to suspend Sophie. She refused to acknowledge any errors in how the league handled the situation. The response was immediate. Fans flooded social media with support for Cunningham. Journalists questioned the league's transparency. Former players weighed in with their own stories of inconsistent punishments and quiet frustrations. It wasn't just about this one case. It was about a pattern. A pattern that Sophie's legal team now argued was rooted in bias and image control. Cunningham herself stayed quiet, letting her legal team speak on her behalf. They accused the league of using public appearances to reshape the narrative instead of engaging in meaningful reform. They claimed Engelbert's language proved their case, that the commissioner was more interested in preserving the league's authority than listening to the concerns of its athletes. Meanwhile, Engelbert held her ground. She doubled down in interviews, reiterating that the league's disciplinary process was thorough and fair. Every incident, she said, was reviewed through a structured chain of command. But critics weren't convinced. They asked, if the process was so fair, why did Sophie's act of standing up for a teammate spark so much outrage and support? Why did it take a lawsuit for the league to start talking about officiating standards at all? The divide deepened. Inside the WNBA Players Association, there were whispers of dissatisfaction. Some veterans supported Engelbert, believing structure and consistency were necessary. Others quietly backed Sophie, arguing that leadership without listening wasn't leadership at all. Across the board, the issue was no longer just a disciplinary matter. It had become a referendum on the league's values. Engelbert's office authorized a league-wide review of officiating decisions over the past 3 years. Publicly, it was described as a step toward transparency. Privately, many saw it as damage control. When asked about the audit, Engelbert didn't offer apologies. She shifted focus back to consistency. Her message: rules were rules, and emotion could not override them. But Sophie's story wasn't about emotion. It was about protection. Fans saw her actions not as defiance, but as a stand for fairness. She wasn't trying to break the rules. She was reacting to what she and others believed were missed calls and uneven enforcement. Her suspension, in their eyes, was punishment not for her actions but for challenging the system. Sophie's legal team followed up with footage and documentation. They highlighted similar incidents involving other players, many of whom received no suspension or were even praised for their competitiveness. The contrast was striking. Their point was clear. Sophie wasn't suspended for what she did. She was suspended because she was willing to call out what others wouldn't. As the season progressed, so did the movement around Sophie. Fans wore her jersey in solidarity. Posters reading, "She had our back," and "Let Sophie play," popped up in arenas. Her presence on the court drew louder cheers than ever. She didn't respond publicly, but her focus, her intensity, and her silence said more than words could. She wasn't just playing basketball, she was making a statement. Engelbert, on the other hand, maintained her media discipline. She stuck to the same points: professionalism, fairness, league integrity. But the longer the issue stayed alive, the more out of touch those words began to sound. She wasn't seen as a leader navigating tough waters. She was increasingly viewed as a leader unwilling to bend, even when the storm demanded it. The media continued to cover the story with growing depth. Articles shifted from game recaps to op-eds about leadership, values, and the relationship between players and management. Sophie became a recurring theme in national sports discussions. Commentators debated whether Engelbert's strict stance was holding the league together or pulling it apart. A defining moment came when Sophie delivered a career performance weeks after the lawsuit was filed. She didn't celebrate. She didn't gesture to the crowd. She simply played. After the game, her coach said, "She shows up. Every time. That's who she is." That quote went viral, reminding everyone that through all the controversy, Sophie's actions still spoke the loudest. Inside league headquarters, the mood was tense. Sponsors had questions. TV executives wanted clarity. Other players wanted consistency. Engelbert's office released another memo, this time focusing on the need to balance discipline with development. It mentioned no names, it offered no resolution, and it satisfied no one. Sophie's attorneys continued to file supporting evidence. They focused not just on past incidents, but on the broader culture of enforcement. They argued that Sophie's punishment was a message, not to maintain order, but to silence dissent. They asked the league to reflect on how power was being used and whether that power aligned with the values the WNBA claimed to uphold. And still, the commissioner remained firm. She made no revisions, issued no walkbacks. To her, changing course now would mean surrendering control. But the cost of that control was mounting. Not just in court, but in the court of public opinion. By the final weeks of the season, it was clear. This story wasn't going away. What started as a single incident had become the defining issue of the year. Sophie had not just challenged a suspension, she had challenged the league to see its players as more than just participants in a system. She had called on leadership to lead with understanding, not just authority. Whether Sophie wins the lawsuit or not, she has already changed something bigger. She turned a moment into a movement. And in doing so, she showed that the power of one voice, when it stands for something larger, can echo louder than any ruling from above. As fans continue to chant her name and commentators continue to tell her story, one truth remains. In a league built on passion, it's not policy that wins loyalty. It's courage. And Sophie Cunningham gave the WNBA one of its bravest moments yet.